Yo, welcome back. For those of you joining for the first time, I'm making a samurai game that's kind of like a mix between Hotline Miami, Samurai Champloo, and Cowboy Bebop. And, let's take a look at what I worked on this week. Let's start with something I promised last week, a short cutscene for drinking Jones's special drink that gives you a passive upgrade if you choose that as a reward. Also a simple standing animation for Genyu for when you play foosball against him. And yes, some people pointed out last week this is not technically foosball, it's more like air hockey, but I originally wanted it to be foosball and I thought it'd be funny to call it that anyway in my games world. And I'm not gonna lie, I was also hoping it would bait people into engaging with my video, but it did not work as well as I had hoped. And I added one more death sprite for the dashing enemy because all the deaths we had for them had them facing the ground and I wanted to add a bit more variety, so now they can end up facing upwards with their body split in half. I went through every level for the demo and added proper collision and elevation to everything. I made it so that all tables can be walked on and most objects on tables won't block you either, except for a few bigger obvious things, and pretty much anything that's not on a table will block you. I made it so that when you finish clearing a level, your attack dash is disabled, which means you can't go through doors, and this forces you to backtrack through the path that you made in the level, forcing you to take in all the wonderful death and destruction you left behind. I'm not sure if in the long run this might get tedious like when you're replaying levels, so we'll see how people feel about that. I also went through all the levels and set the high scores and minimum times you have to beat in order to get the highest possible ratings. I'm probably going to have to redo this later because the levels aren't really all that well balanced difficulty wise right now. I think we'll find out for sure in the playtests, but I'm pretty sure they're a bit harder than they need to be. Having said that, I made a few changes to the overall score system. First, the combo meter lasts longer now, but it breaks if you miss an attack or if you get interrupted by an object hitting you. And I made this change because the cigarette timer in the game already counts towards your rating and tests your speed, so I wanted to make the combo meter a unique test of your precision instead of it also being a test of speed. There are 3 types of bonus points you can get. One's called style, the second variety, and the third multi-kill. Multi-kill is self-explanatory and the biggest bonus you can get. Variety is the second biggest bonus and you'll only get it on the first kill you make with a specific method. So the first time you kill someone with a shuriken, for example, you'll get that big bonus, and the first time you kick an object at a guy and then kill him, that'll also give you a bonus, and combinations of moves also count as a unique method. So for example, if I kill a guy with a shuriken normally, that's going to be 1 variety bonus point, but then if I kick an object at a guy and then kill him with a shuriken, that's considered to be a totally different kind of kill. So the bonus will activate on each of those. And the last and simplest bonus, the one called style, is what you get anytime you kill a guy using a different method from whatever one you used on your last kill. So basically you get the big variety points the first time you use a new method, and then every time you use it after that, as long as you keep switching up between the different things you're doing, you'll just keep getting style points. And as you may have noticed, the biggest change by far this week is the HUD. First, I changed the little marker that appears every time you attack. That's mostly to help you see how you screwed up when you die. And second, I changed all the font to make it more stylish. Now here's the deal. I did this because people have commented a few times asking about the font. Personally, I really liked the original font I was using. It's gothic, it's vintage, kinda moody and jazzy, and I felt like it fit the aesthetic, and I had looked at a good couple hundred font options and honestly couldn't find anything that I thought fit better. But I understand why some people didn't like it. It's a standard font, it's called Oswald, and you can come across it pretty often on the internet, so I decided to give it one last look over, and ultimately I found that one stylish option was this brush-like font that I had used elsewhere in the game. I think it also works pretty well. I definitely feel like the cleared text looks better now, as well as the number rating you get at the end of the level, but for the overall HUD, I don't know. I'm still kind of stuck between this one and the old one. I'm kind of attached to that original version, so I'm not 1000% sure, but hey, let me know what you guys think. So it's been a lot of work recently. I need to take a day or so off, but we are getting so close, guys. I am super pumped about where we're at. This week, all I gotta do is go over the dialogue script. I just want to make sure all the writing is top-notch. And then it's finally time to go all in on the music and the sound. Someone asked at some point about putting the music on Spotify. I will look into that once I have more of the soundtrack done for the demo. Now, in the midst of all my hard work, I had something of a spiritual epiphany recently. This happens to me once in a long while. I've made a couple videos before about why I believe in free will, and my argument was not so much about trying to prove that free will really exists, but rather about making the point that it doesn't matter. Because you're better off believing in it no matter what, because the more you believe in your ability to act, the more likely you are to succeed. For example, if you have 2 students and everything else being equal, one says, "I'm gonna gonna get 100% on this test because I know I can do it, I'll do whatever it takes, and the other says, I can probably get 80% realistically, I guess. Naturally, the first guy is likely going to do better, motivated by his belief that he can choose to do more. I still think that's true, but a while ago I was seeing someone, and I shared my thoughts about this with this fine lady, and she pointed out to me, yeah, but whether or not you believe you have free will is itself something that you don't have control over. And at the time, I didn't fully appreciate just how much her argument completely undermined mine, because at the time, I thought, yeah, but you telling yourself that you have no control over that is what will weaken your will. It seems almost paradoxical, you see, I couldn't really wrap my head around that. But recently something made me start reflecting on this again, and I realized that she was ultimately right. My claim about believing in free will makes sense from a personal advice standpoint, in that you shouldn't say to yourself, I don't have control, because that can stop you from doing things you might otherwise be able to do. But she's right that from an outside, objective point of view, whether or not you actually end up following that advice isn't something you chose to do in some arbitrary sense. It's just the consequence of a series of events following the laws of physics. Going back to the thought experiment with the two students, the more motivated student will do better, but he doesn't choose to be the more motivated student. And it got me thinking, why does the idea of not having free will bother me so damn much? I feel like I've been afraid of diving completely into the idea for some reason, and I think the reason is because of my spiritual beliefs. I don't follow any religion, but I have my own beliefs that I reasoned out a long time ago, so I do believe in God, though maybe not in the way how most people think of God, and I do believe that there is a universal purpose to existence, more importantly. And if we have free will, as I thought, then the purpose of life is to use your will to follow this universal purpose. But if instead everything is on a predetermined course, then what's the point of all this? And doesn't that mean we are doomed in some sense? That we can't ever fully fulfill our purpose because we don't actually have real control? And what about concepts like justice? Why does that exist? How can we ever blame anyone for anything if everything is just the result of a biological computer? And the more I thought about all this, the more I realized that as a matter of fact, there is a way to explain everything in a perfectly satisfying way, even if everything is deterministic. For example, if we put someone in prison for committing a crime, it doesn't have to be because they deserve it or because they're responsible. It can simply be because most of us have agreed that we don't want them around, and that this acts as a deterrent to other people who might want to do the same thing. But that's an easy example. So let's imagine instead it's far into the future, and we've learned enough about the brain to be able to transform even the most violent criminal into a totally peaceful person. Now imagine there's some guy who does some horrible thing, maybe he's a serial killer. Imagine he kills someone close to you, and the court convicts him, orders him to go to Dr. Genius Scientist, who promptly transforms him into a peace-loving hippie, and of course, sets him free. After all, he's not a danger to anyone else anymore, so what would be the point of putting him in prison? My intuition tells me that most people would not be okay with this. It makes perfect sense logically, and yet something inside of us cries out for this thing called justice. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. Maybe it's an emotion we evolved to feel for self-protection, maybe it's something deeper and more divine that we're feeling, but either way, we can still justify putting this person in prison simply on the grounds that too many people would be upset by them being free, and so they have to serve some amount of time for the sake of the stability of society at large. My point is, we can come to the same conclusions we do now for practical purposes without ever having to appeal to the idea of a person being responsible for their actions or misusing their free will or whatever. And what about my belief in a purpose for the universe and for life? Isn't all hope lost if we can't make choices for ourselves? On the contrary, I realize that it might actually be the opposite. If people had some kind of magic free will that lets you arbitrarily make choices, the purpose that I believe in might be impossible to fulfill. Because no matter what the conditions are, no matter what happens, anyone at any time can choose to think, nah, I'm gonna be evil instead. But if instead we are on a one-way train to our destiny, it is inevitable that if I'm right about this purpose existing, it will be fulfilled. And whatever God had in mind, we're all heading there whether we like it or not. Although I did also wonder why specifically God would have created a universe with consciousness but no free will. Are we all just separate pieces of God, and each one of us is a way for God to experience every possible experience that could ever be had? Or was he lonely and wanted creatures to develop that could experience a sense of communion with him? Or maybe we exist to help him relieve his loneliness by experiencing love through us and the way that we love each other. Who knows? But one thing's for sure, though, is that if this is the case, that means we're all part of a bigger plan, whether we like it or not, and we probably have no idea what role we're even playing in it. But anyway, finally, what about motivating yourself in your own life? Doesn't being a totally fatalistic determinist undermine that? Won't you always be thinking, well, I could try to follow my dreams, but realistically, I'm probably not going to be able to accomplish that? And I don't think that's the case at all either. Think about how many people there are in history who started in one place, ended up in another, and no one could have ever possibly guessed that they would have ended up there. Even if everything is deterministic, things are too complicated to be able to guess what'll happen, and what we have before us is seemingly a huge set of possibilities, and what we're really deciding when we think about what we want to do with our lives is which of these do we want to explore? Which of these paths do we want to go down and see where it will inevitably lead? And precisely because of a deterministic way of thinking, we can motivate ourselves using the original line of thought that I had, which is the understanding that the more power you think you have, the more power you will actually have, even if things don't turn out exactly how you want them to. Basically just a different way of saying the old saying that goes something like, you aim for the stars and you land on the moon, or you shoot for the stars and land on the moon, something like that. So in practice, what difference does any of this make? It all seems very abstract and theoretical. I have to admit, it almost feels like I've really just gone in one big circle, because I end up back in the position where it's kind of like it actually doesn't really matter, because you have to live your life as if you have free will, even though it seems like there isn't any good reason for believing in it. But I actually did notice at least one difference for me when I completely tried to internalize this, which is that it has allowed me to control my emotions and my reactions more when it comes to other people. Instead of reacting immediately to someone's behavior, I find myself able to instead stop and think about, why is this person doing what they're doing? What must their state of mind be? How did they end up in this situation, and what makes them who they are, and so on? It helps me to care more about understanding why things are and why people are the way that they are, rather than trying to make a moral judgment and assigning blame to people and things like that. And it helps me to more deeply accept that, in some sense, however bad things may be, they are exactly the way that they have to be, or that they're supposed to be. And maybe on some level as well, it helps me to sit back and allow myself to just experience life more and understand it as an experience, rather than being so stuck in my own head. One last weird thought experiment before I go. What would it be like to be a very simple robot that for some reason has consciousness? Like if I was a robot in a factory where I put bottles into a box and I had sentience, what would that experience be? And I couldn't think of any explanation other than that it would have to be exactly what it's like being human, just simpler. You wouldn't be observing yourself from the outside, choosing to put bottles in a box somehow, like you're remote controlling the robot. You would be the robot, specifically the robot's brain. You would experience all the calculations happening in your programming, and then you would experience choosing to put the bottle in the box. And assuming you're not capable of any deeper thought, your natural intuition would be that you choose to put the bottle in the box, when in reality, you don't make a choice at all. You are the brain experiencing the process of a choice being made. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope a sequence of events will occur in such a way that you will join me here again next week. Peace.